I find it super interesting because it was only maybe 2 short years ago that weight loss was starting to trend up. Where I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that's really something we need to look at. Let's look at that." Then last year, hair restoration, hair renewal was starting to trend with exosomes, right? And now it's so interesting to me how fast and furious these trends
Yeah.
and these innovations come out. And then here we are 2 years later, and we're really looking at regulation. You want to be able to provide the best quality product service that you can put out to your patient.
This is MedSpa Mayhem, the podcast all about the chaotic world of medical aesthetics. From Botox to lasers to IV bars, learn how to tell real versus fake, legal versus illegal, and safe versus potentially deadly. Hear the crazy stories inside the med spa world and find out what questions to ask and how to spot the people cutting corners. I'm your host, Dr. Kate D. Together, we explore the wild west of medicine that is the aesthetics industry. Today's guest is Nicole Gregory. She is CEO and co founder of Urban U Beauty and Wellness in Michigan. She is another super smart, high powered woman in medical aesthetics. And she and I met through our common interests in basically the wild west of the aesthetics industry that we've been talking about. Today is the first part of a two-part conversation. Today, we're going to be covering all the latest and greatest innovations in the medical aesthetics industry. And in part two, which will air separately, we'll talk about the mayhem in the medical aesthetics industry and what we're both doing locally and nationally to try to address that problem. So I hope you really enjoy today's episode. Hi, this is Dr. Kate D, and I'm speaking today with Nicole Gregory. She is co founder and CEO of Urban U Beauty and Wellness, which is in Western Michigan. And she's also the founder and CEO of Pinch Gig, which I'd love to get into what that is in a little bit. She originally grew up in Michigan, went to Northern Michigan University, getting her Bachelor of Science in Marketing in 1994, and then went to UCLA for her MBA, finishing that business degree in 1997 and ultimately founding Pinch Gig in 2015 and then the MedSpa in 2017. So
Mhm.
thanks so much for joining me today, Nicole.
Thanks for having me, Dr. KD. Appreciate you. And I always enjoy talking to you about what's going on in the industry.
Yeah, well, the from the moment we started talking, I really wanted to have you on the podcast because we have so much overlap and our passions are very similar. So
Yeah.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation. So I was hoping that we could start with your telling us your story. Obviously, you have a business degree and how that led you into the med spa space and what you're
Mhm.
doing now.
Yeah. Without going too far back, I think it's important to go a little bit far back because I come from my parents, my grandparents, both being entrepreneurs, and then growing up in an entrepreneurial family. It was really, very self evident at a very young age that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So, as I was growing up, the one thing, as you know, with any skill that you do or you have, the more you do it, the better you get. And the more you're around it, the more often you can kind of see, okay, this could be good, this could be bad. There's a lot of problem solving that goes on. So the one thing I became pretty good at as my career went on as an entrepreneur, which back then no one knew what an entrepreneur was. I mean, I did do some time in the corporate, 500, great experience, but decided to be an entrepreneur. And at that time, again, people did not know what it was. It was kind of a dirty word, like, oh, you're going to go start a business. But what I got really good at because of that background of being around it pretty consistently since I was young, and we would, my dad had a fishing store at one time, and I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I'm putting labels on different fishing flies. So it wasn't just, hey, my parents are entrepreneurs; we were in it. So I got good at looking at through the forest and being able to, kind of the bushes, the grass, kind of everything goes away, and being able to look at gaps in the market And so with that, I did start and I have started, bought, built, exited multiple businesses over my career. And I moved back to Michigan from Southern California. And when I moved back here, I was in an area, it's called Grand Rapids, very nice area. It's about 1 million-ish people. And I didn't really see a lot of what I saw in California, which was street level medical aesthetics. And as I was
Mhm.
looking around, I really noticed it was more of the dermatologist or plastic surgeon doing that type of work, which is great and very, that's how the industry started, right? That's where it all kind of came from. So when I started looking at that, I took my background as an entrepreneur and said, what can we do with this based on what I know, what I've seen in California, and how the services were really coming about. So I opened Urban U in 2017.
I actually have a whole chapter about that in my book about how the medical spa industry arose after medical aesthetics started with plastic surgeons and derms. And,
Mhm.
Botox Cosmetic was first FDA approved for cosmetic use back in 2003. And so I kind of date the birth of the aesthetics industry to then. But back then, it was really mostly plastic surgeons and dermatologists who were offering that. But over time, what happened is they created this cadre of injectors who were kind of mid level injectors or even
Mhm.
nurses. And they were medical offices, and it was hard to get in there, and nobody answers the
Mhm.
phone, and they don't get back to you, and it's hard to schedule. And so med spas were kind of born out of that by both like doctors like me and entrepreneurs like you, where they
Mhm.
want to create that kind of quality medical service but in a much more spa-like, lovely environment. So I wrote
Mhm.
all about that, and I think,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
I listened
um,
to your book, by the way. It was fantastic. You did a
oh,
really
you
good
did.
job. Yeah, no, you did a great job laying out the
Thank you.
industry, kind of where it was, where it's at now, where it's going. So you did a really great job. I enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah, well, I think that, people really benefit when it's done well, right?
Mhm.
And I know that we both have done it well because I know who you are and you know who I am. And a lot about why we ended up meeting is because there's a lot of it that's not being done well. But
That's
we'll get
right.
to that eventually.
Yes. Yeah,
I
right.
really but I really kind of want to talk. So in 2017 you opened up Urban U, right? Do you have
Mhm.
one location or do you have more than one location now?
We 3 locations. So throughout Michigan, we have two in Grand Rapids and one over in the east side over by Detroit.
Okay. And
Um,
and I saw on your website that you have a physician who is the medical director
that's
and
right.
you have a bunch of nurse injectors. How do you manage the good faith exam with one doctor? Do you have other people who can do the introductory consultation and good faith exam, or how does that work?
Well, she does rotate between locations frequently. So she's very, very hands on. Dr. Sanchez has been with our organization. And since the beginning, she has not only wanted to make sure she's very hands on, but she also wants to make sure we're a very collective team. So if there's anything that's not in line with our SOP or compliance, we're always kind of coming back together to make sure we are doing that. So between her being available in locations, and then also we do a lot of telemedicine if needed. And then we have a couple of PAs as well in our Detroit location that we will bring in as needed as we do what we call our wellness consultation. Those are scheduled on really specific days. So we have them do the wellness consultation if Dr. Sanchez can't is not available. So it's tricky because not everyone does that, right? Not everyone is there to make sure a doctor or some type of physician is or physician's assistant is there to make sure that's done properly.
Yeah, I think that it's really hard to manage, and there are a lot of med spas out there that have only RNs that don't even do a good faith exam, and
Mhm.
as we've covered in this podcast, that's not
Yeah,
legal. So it becomes really dicey, right? Like,
right.
how do you actually make a medical decision if there's no one in the place who can make a medical
Yeah.
decision? So I
Well, and
think that's
with that, like I said, Dr. Sanchez has been amazing. And so we have created these literally they're red boxes in each location that not only have anything if there is a emergency type of situation, but also protocols and procedures in there. Now they're trained on it 2, 3 times a year, depending on, when we get together for our kind of company wide training. But she's created protocols and procedures that I think really stick. Once you start doing those as a company and making sure you're sticking to that, no one wants to deviate from it. And I think that we've talked a lot about it out there in the industry where there are people who are just aren't doing it one right or just doing it at all. So, when looking at, how can I elevate my company, if we're talking about that to a medical spa, you really want to look at not only just doing it right, but going above and accelerating at that. And I think that's more of a cultural thing. So when we created Urban U, that was one of our things. We said, how are we going to really do this right? And to your point, we wrapped marketing and technology around the brand. Of course, always making sure that the medical aesthetics, keeping the word medical in the aesthetic side of it. But when trying to look at the industry, how do you create a differentiator out there? And it's really, I do believe, consistently being on the medical side, but also looking at that experience and how we do it through marketing and technology.
So I think that your point's really interesting that once you've created a culture where your level of quality is very high, your standards are what they are. This is your standard protocol. So all patients need to have a good faith
Mhm.
exam before they can have a procedure. And my staff all know that. So they all know to look for that. They all know to refer back to that. They all know to make sure that person's cleared for that procedure. And if someone hasn't, if somehow they manage to book themselves for a medical procedure and they've never been to my place before, my staff won't, they'll be like, oh gosh, we need to get you in for a consultation first before we can do that, because you don't know whether the
Right.
patient is a good candidate for something
Mhm.
or not if they've never been seen by a physician or a nurse practitioner or a PA, like someone who can make that medical decision. And even though like people, if someone's listening to this out there who's had medical procedures, oh, I've had it before, I know I could have it again. That's probably
Mhm.
true, but life keeps happening and you get older and you can be tan now. You weren't tan before, or you have a new condition now that you didn't have before, or or we detect something, kidney disease, and you really can't do one thing or other. So it is important to be assessed
Right.
before you have a procedure. And I also feel very
Yeah.
strongly in my practice that just because someone else said it was okay doesn't mean that I would necessarily agree with them. So I need to make sure that that's the case.
We do ours annually. Do you guys do yours annually then?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So you're supposed to do it annually, and only recently was my system able to handle that form annually. I know that doesn't make any sense, but the software that I was using wasn't allowing us to update that form. So that
Yeah.
was very strange, but yes. But generally, we always like once a patient's an established patient, if they are interested in something entirely different than what they came in for before. Let's say they came in for laser hair removal and they've done that in the past, but now they're interested in laser resurfacing for their face. We'll do a little follow-up consultation and document that. Yes,
Mhm.
yeah, we talked about
Mhm.
that and make
Yeah.
sure that they were a good candidate for that.
No, and I think that, it's such a great point is, sometimes we even get pushback from our clients. Like, why do I have to do this annually? You go to your doctor annually, don't you? And try to make sure everything's well. And it's an intake. But we call it the wellness consultation because we really want to know all about you. And what areas do you want to make well? It's you say I want to fix something, but I think it's a psychological difference when I'm talking to a medical provider such as yourself, you're telling me, look at this from a wellness perspective. And then we go through that process and through listening, they then put them on a wellness journey. And the journey, we try to do about 3 months at least up front. And then, so it's not overwhelming through what does this whole year look like? Oh, you have a wedding in 6 months. Let's make sure we have this process set up for you. So yeah, that's been really successful. And I do believe seeing a doctor, it's super important to see the doctor or someone such as a PA that's delegated by the doctor to do that. That it is, there's an authority, right? And a sense of safety, trust that's built right away.
Yeah, so I noticed that you have a pretty long list of services just like we do, and you do kind of the whole standard injectables, laser hair removal, stuff like that. What other wellness services do you have in your spa?
Well, we are looking always, as most everyone is, right? Like, what's the newest trend that's coming up? And trend can be taken as a good word or a bad word, but I do believe it's more toward innovation. What are we seeing now? It's the newest innovation that people want. And that's kind of what a trend is, right? So when we look at what is out there, which I'm going to a conference tomorrow to do a little bit more of that research, what's coming up in 25. We've added hair renewal and restoration. We have weight loss. We've added a lot of exosomes. We're moving towards some functional medicine with a concierge health inside of our locations. So,
Okay, awesome. So I'm curious to know, I think a lot of those things are interesting topics. We also added a weight loss program last year. And I just did a podcast episode about the chaos about terzepatide. And I was wondering your thoughts on that. I know, I think that your website said you were using oral semaglutide as
mhm,
your
yeah,
main thing. So, and semaglutide is still on the shortage list, although we know that the FDA could, yank that at any time.
right.
But I'm wondering your thoughts about weight loss. I just saw that Eli Lilly issued a public statement to their investors saying they do not support the use of their drugs for weight loss and that they only support it for use in diabetes and obesity management. And
Mm.
so I'm really curious to know your thoughts on that because I personally think that's ridiculous. But
Well, they should have
um,
said that a long time ago. I mean, they kind of, started a downhill, slide here because everyone is into the weight loss trend. I mean, it went from 0 to, 90 miles an hour really fast. It's the
yeah,
fastest growth in any new product or service we've ever seen in this market. We've looked at well different products over the years and we're doing injectables. We haven't done injectables yet. And there's multiple reasons why. But, we okay, as you can get in with the newest shiniest penny, right? And you kind of have to go like make an evaluation. Is this the product we want? So do we want to be in weight loss one? Do we want to be injectables or more of the, dissolvable side of it? So decided that our guests, we would be able to have a relationship that was a little bit more, it's just a little bit easier for us to manage. We've definitely seen weight loss with that with our clients. We have now considered going into the injectable side, as you know, when you're doing an injectable faster weight loss right away. But what we thought too when we were doing it, the dissolvable, we realized that people don't not lose as much weight right up front. You do end up by about 4 weeks difference, losing the same as you would injectable side, but it takes a minute, but you also don't have all the laxity and the hollowing that you would with an injectable. So we've seen that's what we've seen as the difference when we're comparing kind of what others are doing or we're seeing with others. For us, we thought that was the best.
yeah. Well, it's evolving because as you know, I'm not really willing to do anything that's not legal, right? So,
Right.
so the issue with semaglutide and tirzepatide is those are both the generic brand names. Semaglutide is made by Novo Nordisk, and tirzepatide's made by Eli Lilly, and the reason tirzepatide has really gone crazy is because and most people feel this way is that it's a better drug.
Yeah.
So it has fewer side effects and more weight loss. So all the studies have really shown that. And so people who have a lot of side effects on semaglutide, so semaglutide's cheaper for sure. So a lot of people are on that. But for people who've had a lot of side effects with that, they go to tirzepatide, they have no side effects. But in general, I mean, as a physician, I'm like, well, if I have people interested in weight loss, I'll pick the drug that's better. However, but Eli Lilly is fighting this tooth and nail.
Hmm.
So Novo Nordisk hasn't really grown their factories. Eli Lilly goes straight to the FDA and said, don't, take this off the shortage list, even though there's no way, the number of millions and millions of people on the drug is enormous.
Yeah.
And for sure, there's still a shortage.
Hmm.
However, if you just look at patients who are diabetic or actually meet the obesity requirements to be treated with the drug, which is you have to be very, very, very obese in order to meet those criteria. Most people who just want to lose weight, they're 20 pounds up or 40 pounds up, they will not meet criteria. So if you look only at those people who qualify for medical treatment, maybe the shortage has been overcome. In my opinion, though, there are tons of people, millions of people on it who aren't going to be able to get it all of a sudden. And I think that all hell's going to break loose. So I personally think that as soon as the compounding pharmacies are not allowed to make this anymore, you're going to see craziness on both directions. I think you're going to see, millions of people who are actually prescribed it and try to go to the pharmacy and get it, and they won't be able to get it. And then I also think there are going to be millions of people who are going to get it illegally from compounding pharmacies and practices that are just willing to go ahead and do it. Or out of the country. Yeah. I mean, it's rampant already. So why won't it be even more rampant once that demand goes?
And the demand will be so high because everyone wants it. And then the price is going to go up because the supply is so low. So it will be interesting.
So I don't know. So currently we are getting it from a 503B compounding pharmacy, and it's incredibly effective. So I have a podcast scheduled, like a follow-up with my colleague, another doctor who has been implementing the program for us, but it works incredibly well. And I used it myself, lost 20 pounds and have kept it off. And I'm really happy, even with just a really low dose. And so I personally am invested in maintaining this.
There's a ton of other health benefits. So.
Yeah, tons of other health. Yeah. So I do think it's going to go totally nuts. But maybe there'll be a lot of people who switch to semaglutide, and whoever can tolerate that, they'll be happy. And if they can't, then I don't know. But I don't think it can stay on the shortage list for long.
It probably won't. But I also know, there's some type of compounding that can be done with slight changes and variations, the same effective.
And that to me is very interesting also. So I actually have a call with my healthcare attorney later this week to ask that specific question. And I think all the compounding pharmacies are consulting their own attorneys to try to get the answer to that. Can we still compound it with other things? And is that legal? Mm-hmm. And as far as I know, the compounding pharmacies all are different legal advice on that. So I don't know. And that big lawsuit is still pending. So the bigger compounding pharmacies have a conglomerate, and they sued the FDA, and that lawsuit is still pending. So the outcome of that is uncertain at this point.
Well, and I find it super interesting because it was only maybe 2 short years ago that weight loss was starting to trend up. Where I was like, oh, that's really something we need to look at. Let's look at that. Then last year, hair restoration, hair renewal was starting to trend with exosomes, right? And now, it's so interesting to me how fast and furious these trends and these innovations come out. And then here we are 2 years later, and we're really looking at regulation. So it's hard. You want to be able to provide the best quality product service that you can put out to your patient. But you have to be careful, right? Because it's this.
Yeah.
Are you going to be the trendsetter? Are you going to be the first follower? Are you going to sit back and watch and see, just kind of as it's plateauing? So it's hard because we are taught in this industry that if you don't get up in front of everyone else, because the market is fairly saturated, you're not going to have a differentiator. But when you work through your matrix and bringing on a new product, that your guests, your patients, we call them guests a lot of times because they're part of our family. When they come in the door, they know you've taken the time to look at this new trend, and you're not just slapping a product out there that's, again, really quickly, let's get it in the door type of thing. You're making sure it's the best for them. So I think that's anyone listening, that has their own medics practice needs to consider what's the next big thing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. What do you think is coming up next? But whatever it is, you have to make sure you have a matrix of for your business.
Well, I think the most important thing is that it's effective, safe, and legal. It has to be all those things. Okay. And the problem with the industry, I think, is one or more of those 3 things is missing. And people go crazy gangbusters on a new thing when either it's not effective or not safe or not legal or all three of those things. So, an example from a few years ago is vaginal rejuvenation.
Yep.
That came on like gangbusters,
Awesome.
and it was so popular and it was in all the meetings and whatever. And my thing about that is it was really effective. So people loved it. It really helped women who had lax tissue, who had dribbling, who were post childbirth or post menopause and had dryness or both of those things. And the amazing thing is it really does work. I'll just tell you, like, it's just amazingly effective. The problem was that all the companies jumped on vaginal rejuvenation without getting their devices cleared for that. So they
Right.
didn't do the studies, they didn't go through all the hoops that you have to go through with the FDA. And the devices, even though they were safe, the companies didn't do it. And the FDA shut it all down. So the FDA came out, shut everybody down, said, no, you can't talk about vaginas at all. And it really like is kind of a problem because they never did. They didn't go back and get anything cleared for that. And so, even though you have these devices that were made and exist, you can't advertise them. You can't really talk about it. And then, of course, on social media, you can't advertise it. And Google, you can't advertise it because if you talk about vaginas, then you get banned. No,
Right.
it's totally true. So, that was an example of actually a really good treatment that like went
Mhm.
sputtering because the industry went too fast. And
Yeah.
so on the other hand, exosomes is another example where some of the exosomes are studied and are really excellent and really work and there's ongoing studies with them. Others not so much, and
Mhm.
they just say they're exosomes, and but if you look actually under the microscope or analyze them, there's little bits of debris and there's no real exosomes in there.
There's
Yeah.
very
Right. So, I mean, we happen to use, I'm curious to know which brand you use. We use plated, which is they're platelet derived exosomes that were originally kind of invented and designed by two MD PhD scientists at
Mhm.
Mayo who kind of branched off and patented their thing. But it's a topical, like it's a
Mhm.
topical. So it
It's a
doesn't,
take. It's
yeah. And you can use it
yes.
post procedure, whatever.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of studies looking at
Mhm.
that, and it's very safe. And but there are a lot of different brands now, and it's
Mhm.
mostly hype. A lot of them are hype, and
Mhm.
that there's no quality controls, and there are no exosomes that are FDA approved. So if you're
Right.
using it as a topical, that's like topical skincare, and that's legal
Right.
because topical skincare is not regulated by the FDA. It's like any other skincare product. Whereas a lot of the exosomes are being advertised for clinical use and procedures and whatever, and none of those are FDA approved. So, it's hard because I think exosomes are really, really powerful,
Yeah.
but everybody kind of jumps on the word exosome and says,
Yeah.
woohoo, exosomes, and they're not all the same and they're not all high
Well, and I
quality.
think
And
that's the point is, which ones do you have to really research them. And we've used a couple over time. But what we're really looking at right now is the synthetic part of an exosome. And there are some newer, even newer technologies out there, not called exosomes
Mhm.
anymore. They're even newer. So I think, you know, again, you have to be in the trend, you have to be part of the innovation. And I do love that about this industry, but you have to make sure why do you want an exosome in your business? I mean, I want an
Right,
exosome in my business because I want people to heal faster, right? I
right.
want the procedure invasive. Well, it's still going to be invasive, but long-term kind of healing. And then want the results to be that much better. So I think for this 2025 year,
Well, I mean, ones that haven't come out yet, I don't know. Like,
well,
um,
trend wise, I don't see a ton. I see exosomes on a ton.
yeah.
I see laser kind of making a big, I'm gonna say it, resurfacing. Laser's always been good, obviously been very consistent, but I see people going to that more than they were going to injectables. 2024 year, we saw a lot of it, and we are seeing a lot of modalities come about that are allowed to kind of deeper, I know I wouldn't say deeper, but overall wellness for laser. So we're seeing more with veins out there. Gosh, we
Mm.
really need a good product with cellulite, don't we? But there's not one.
There
But
isn't one. No, I
yeah,
mean, there's never been a good treatment for that. And maybe
right.
I should do a whole podcast about cellulite. I did have a little section in the book about why nothing works for cellulite. I
Yeah,
can explain why nothing works.
yeah.
And, but, every time somebody comes out with something new that I think, ooh, that has potential, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Even I think the one that I thought would be effective was this device that I think came and went. It was, I think, Selfina
Okay.
was this one where you could actually lice the connective bands that tug your skin and dimple it.
Mhm.
So for people who haven't read the book, what happens with cellulite is inside your fat you have these septae, these fibrous septae that are connected to the skin. And so if you gain a little weight, it's not just that you're a little chubbier, it's that those pockets, it's like a honeycomb inside, and those little connecting fibrous bands tug your skin in as the fat pooches it out. And those bands don't go anywhere. And you can laser lice them. They just seal right up. You can go in with a scalpel and cut them, and they regrow.
Mhm.
And this Selfina thing was kind of like that. And you would cut them, and it's still they would just retether. And then the crazy one that there were some really crazy pictures was Quo, was a injectable that broke down collagen. It was a collagenase that you could inject, and it was supposed to dissolve those bands. Well, that didn't work either. And also, it caused massive bruising, like massive, to the
Mhm.
point where your entire butt or your entire leg would be purple. And
Mhm.
when big bruising heals, you end up with hemosiderin staining, which so you have this permanent darker kind of
Yeah.
brown purple staining of the skin, and that doesn't go away like at all.
Yeah.
So Quo kind of came and went, and there really hasn't been anything that's
Uh-uh.
come along that's been effective.
I think the biggest thing with
Um,
that is just weightlifting. You've got it just
uh,
like you said, there's the weight loss that's going on. And, with the weight loss, obviously people become a bit more energetic. And now hopefully, there's the weightlifting, just strength training, but really
yeah,
working those legs, if that's where the cellulite is, or wherever it might be. But yeah, we tried a few of those products too. We dodged a few bullets on the injectable one, Quo. I was like, oh yeah, it was
it did
not worth
not look
it.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think the main, you asked me what I see for 25. What I see is, assuming medical weight loss continues, which I think it will,
Mhm.
people are doing a lot less body contouring with devices and a lot more medical weight loss. But what then you need is strength training and toning and skin tightening. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So, I think the device M Sculpt Neo is going to be used
Uh-huh.
post weight loss to help you look toned again, right? So
Uh-huh.
you lose the weight, now you've got a little loose hangy skin, you've got a lot less fat, and now hopefully your muscles didn't waste too much. One of the things with the medical weight loss is you absolutely have to eat enough protein. So like if you're not eating enough protein, you're
Yeah.
going to get muscle wasting along with that. So
Uh-huh.
it suppresses your appetite to the point where you're just sort of barely eating enough, to be
Uh-huh.
healthy and sustained as a human.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So, as part of that, you cannot eat any junk because the junk will fill you up and then you won't get enough protein. So, you've got to eat minimum amounts of protein and vegetables. And for the most part, nothing else, because that will fill you up and you won't be hungry.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so
Yeah.
hopefully you haven't lost too much muscle with the medical weight loss. But I think that is what's going to be the trend, is doing
It's
weight
really smart.
training, M
Yeah.
Sculpt Neo. And then, one thing which we have in my practice is M Phase, which hasn't been gangbusters because it does get the collagen of all of your skin, only for parts of your skin. So I know my listeners know that I'm passionate about maintaining your collagen in your skin and doing skin tightening for people my age. I think
Uh-huh.
maybe a few years older than you.
Yeah. We both
I'm
own med spas. It's
we
wow.
do.
It's
It's
really
right. I know. I'm about to turn 57. So, but
okay.
right. So we're up there. But I think that for post medical weight loss, if your face looks a little more gaunt than it looked before, you were rounder before, whatever, I think maybe that device will have a role in that. Skin tightening, RF microneedling, super important to make sure that you keep your collagen so that you once you've lost your weight, you don't look, sickly, because
Right.
that's the danger, right? Is losing too much weight and then looking kind of that would be terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are all, you're right. The skin type where it's going to be, and the opportunity. I think one thing you kind of started with is pinch gig, and I'll kind of jump into that with this conversation. Is I do believe that the industry is at a rebirth of itself. So there's been all huge growth, 23 and 24, tons of saturation and fragmentation that's went on in the market space. And then with that, when you get that, you do unfortunately get bad outcomes, and you get bad characters in the space. And I think that this year you're really looking at those that are in the business that are going to stay in it, because I've seen it, but we're seeing a lot of people drop off via a solo salon, or an individual single shingle. So what we're seeing is people adding in components of excellence in customer service. So, an AI kind of before and after modeling, 3D model. So I now, as the consumer, can actually see what I look like prior to coming in. So really elevating. So are there new products and services? Like, yes, there are going to be those, and we've talked about that. But the difference in the market's really going to be are those businesses that choose to create an experience that is based on, how can I, one, elevate prior to you coming in, but once you come in, build that trust and that relationship. And that's where I'll jump into HingeGig. HingeGig is a software that we developed, gosh, it was a handful of years ago. And what we really saw in the market at that point, where there were a lot of independent contractors in the space. So what we find, and you probably find, the majority of the healthcare professionals that do injectables are females, and they are the primary caretaker for, whether it's for their children or for their grandma, whoever it might be. So they need a ton of what we kind of three things they need: the flexibility to have schedules. They want mobility, so they can kind of move around, whether it's summertime in Michigan and maybe they want to be somewhere else in a different season. They want so flexibility, mobility, and income ability. So maybe they don't want to work during the summer, but they want to work a ton during the fall. This allows that income ability, because I have to get my kids into playing club soccer now. So I really take care of some bills, right? So when you look at someone who is the female primary caretaker, they want to make an impact on what they're doing, but they do need those three things: flexibility, mobility, and income ability. So this app allows providers, actually within a business, they can, or independent contractors, it doesn't matter, however you have your system set up, but it basically allows them to put their shift into, think of it as Uber, and it puts it in there. Hey, who wants to pick this shift up? Now, this is only available at Urban U, and we're going to be expanding it, but we have 4 different levels. So it's level 1 through 4. So if I put this in and I'm a level 3, only a level 3 gets notified of that, kind of that ping of saying, do you want to pick the shift up? So pick that shift up, and then Susie is let off the hook, and I'm taking that shift for her. But I'm a level
Mm.
3.
So they start out with a schedule, but they can basically list their shifts they don't want to do and someone else can pick it up.
Yep, exactly. And usually, our once we have our schedule, everyone's pretty much set. But then there's the baseball game that comes up, or there's,
Hmm.
I've got to go out of town for X, Y, and Z. So it's usually within a week or two of a shift of that schedule that they need to make that modification.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's worked really well for us. And I think that human component, like really understanding this industry and what's important to it, as I was saying, from the AI, the technology piece,
Hmm.
from the consumer side for the providers.
So does that software interface with your MedSpa software?
Yeah, our point of
Would
sale. Yeah, we use Zenoti
Oh,
as,
yeah, we use Zenoti as
yep,
well.
yes, right
Okay.
into that.
Okay. That's really cool. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like how flight attendants
Exactly.
trade around their flights and
Mhm.
stuff. That's really cool. Yeah. I mean, we do that. Probably have a smaller pool of people potentially because I mean, in my spa, it's, there's 3 injectors and 3 master estheticians. And so each pool of 3, they trade around a ton
Yeah.
to make sure everything's covered.
Yeah. It,
But
it was getting to a point, but it was coming, spending a lot of time. We have 13 injectors, and we have 6 estheticians. Remember
across
that
the different
across the
locations.
different levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that sounds like a really handy tool. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
especially if it's because I think Zenodi's become the industry standard.
Yes.
There's a few competitors, but even though we have our issues with Zenodi, we could have a whole other
We
conversation
could
about
have
Zenodi.
a
Right. Take
hate
the good
it.
with the bad. Yes, I know. Well, listen, I would love to have another conversation with you about the legal compliance side. Can we
Yeah.
do a whole other conversation about that? Because I think that
Yeah.
will be really interesting. Okay, awesome. If you're interested in connecting with Nicole or learning more about Urban U or Pinch Gig, we will have links to those in our show notes. If you've learned something and like what we're doing, please tell your friends and give us a 5-star rating in your podcast app. If you have a question or a crazy story of your own you'd like to share, please send an email or voice recording to info@drkatedee.com. That's DRKATEDEE.com. Or reach us through the website medspamayhem.com. And read the book. MedSpa Mayhem is available everywhere books are sold. Thanks for listening. This has been MedSpa Mayhem with Dr. Kate D. We are so grateful you're listening, and we hope you've learned at least one fun or possibly disturbing fact today. Don't forget to hit subscribe on your podcast app and leave us a 5-star review. And read the book. MedSpa Mayhem is available everywhere books are sold. Links and more can be found in the show notes and on medspamayhem.com.